Hey, what the hell are you doing? How are you? Hey, it's me, Nick Digilio. Thanks for checking out my YouTube channel. Check me out on Patreon as well. It's a great way to help people out who are on Patreon, providing some services and some fun and some stories. And I'm doing videos, so if you can help out, that'd be great. Donate a little dough, pick a tier, and donate some money. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Pick a tier, donate. It'll help out a lot. You get some bonus materials too. Patreon.com/NickDShow. My podcast is the Nick D Podcast. New episodes every Tuesday, every Friday on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Check out RadioMisfits.com or Google the Nick D Podcast. You'll find it on every single platform out there. And also, I'm launching a new podcast, January 11th. It will start also on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, and it's called That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years, an SNL podcast. And it is a podcast that is all about SNL. I have watched every single episode, and I'm not exaggerating, I've watched every single episode of SNL since the very beginning, October 11th, 1975. I was 10 years old. The first host was George Carlin, and I've been watching it since, through the ups, through the downs, for 48 seasons. And I've got an encyclopedic weird knowledge of SNL. And so as a result, I thought, I'm gonna use this knowledge and my love of SNL to talk about it on a podcast and to share that with you. It will be a very loose podcast, a very fun podcast, weekly, once a week. It will drop every Wednesday, starting January 11th. And sometimes I'll have a guest, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll talk about specific episodes. Sometimes I'll talk about cast members, worst cast members, best cast members, guest hosts, the best hosts of all time, the most memorable sketches of all time. Entire episodes will be dedicated to just specific sketches or specific moments. I will have SNL-related guests, people who have been on SNL, writers, people who were inspired by SNL and went on to do other things. Tons of people that I worked with at Second City. All the years I was at Second City, I will have those people on as well. It is an all-encompassing, all-wonderful tribute to the fantastic 48 seasons of Saturday Night Live, and I am thrilled to be hosting it again. It launches at RadioMisfits.com and on every platform. It's called That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years, an SNL podcast. Of course, I don't believe that statement. That's why there's an irony in why I called it that, because people who actually say that about the show are morons, and I'm going to prove them wrong with every episode. So get ready for that and check it out. And in celebration of this podcast coming up, this SNL podcast that I am hosting, I thought I would do an SNL-related video here just to talk about some of the stuff. And this is the kind of thing that we'll be talking about on my podcast, that I'll be talking about, sharing with my guests, sharing with you. I want to get feedback from you. Whatever you feedback to me, your favorite sketches, your favorite SNL memories and moments. I want all of that stuff. We're going to talk about all of it on That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years. So to kick it off, I thought I'd do a video about where I would rank all the movies, all the feature films based on SNL characters or sketches. So not movies that are based on or that star SNL cast members, because we'd be here for fucking 5 weeks doing a video on that. Not stuff, that starred the people, but actual movies, feature movies that were based on sketches or characters that were created specifically for SNL. So if this was a sketch on SNL, or characters that debuted on SNL and became feature films, that's what we're talking about. Because if we talked about all the movies that every cast member in the history of SNL was on, I would be doing videos a day for the next 45 years. So this is, and there are only 11 films. That's how specific it is. It is specifically movies based on SNL sketches / characters. There are only 11 of them, and I've ranked them from best to worst. Now, this list is not a quality list. Of the 11 movies, there aren't a lot of good ones on this list. There are a couple of great ones. Get a little bit of funny here and there, but for the most part, these are not classics. The majority of the movies on this list of 11 movies based on SNL characters / sketches, they're not classics. They're not gone down in history as some of the comedic genius films of all time. This is not comedy cinema's high notes. Let me just say that. Of the 11 movies here, you're not going to be going, oh yeah, that's a masterpiece, that's a classic. Not a lot of them on this list. But there are some good things and some fun things and some stuff that you should know about. So again, there's only 11 on this list, and I did not include, even though I could have if I wanted to be very anal and very technical about it, and to follow my ridiculous knowledge of SNL, which will be on display every week on That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years, an SNL podcast, radiomisfits.com. I did not include a couple of things. I did not include Mr. Saturday Night, because technically Mr. Saturday Night, the Billy Crystal movie from 1993 or 92, is based on a character that he did first on an HBO special, but then became a regular character on SNL, the 10th season, where Billy Crystal was a regular. That character, they did a sketch, and then he became kind of a semi-regular on Update. So the Mr. Saturday Night, that movie with Billy Crystal and David Paymer, that came out in 92, I did not include on this list of movies, even though technically I could have, because the character, Buddy, was a part of Saturday Night Live. But I did not include it because I think that's reaching. I also did not include Bob Roberts. Bob Roberts is the mockumentary about the political candidate that was written and directed and starring Tim Robbins, also came out in 1992. And the Bob Roberts character debuted in a short that also was on Saturday Night Live first. So the very first time you ever saw Bob Roberts was when Tim Robbins, he didn't host, it wasn't when he was hosting, actually. He was not a host. But when that character, the Bob Roberts character, showed up in a pseudo short that debuted on SNL. So the Bob Roberts character did technically debut on SNL. Did not include the movie Bob Roberts on this list. A Mighty Wind, I did not include one of the awful Christopher Guest mockumentaries that I hate so much. And there's another video about why I hate Christopher Guest's mean-spirited and often very, very unfunny mockumentaries. But A Mighty Wind could have been included because the Folksmen is a band that is included in the movie, the Christopher Guest movie Mighty Wind. They were featured on a sketch on the 10th season of SNL when Christopher Guest, like Billy Crystal, was a cast member. So I'm not including A Mighty Wind, even though technically I could. I am also not including Office Space, where the animated shorts about the character in Office Space, Mervyn, they were also featured on SNL. Those animated shorts that Mike Judge did about the character that Stephen Root played with his red stapler, those originated on SNL. But I am not including Office Space, and I am also not including a very obscure and very fucking weird movie called Harold, which came out, I think, in 2008 or 2007, and it was written and directed by a guy named T. Sean Shannon. And T. Sean Shannon wrote a bunch of very weird shit for SNL in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, including a running film sketch, series of sketches called Bear City, which was a bunch of filmed sketches that were about a city that consisted of nothing but people in bear costumes, bears. And it was called Bear City. And Fred Willard was the narrator and one of the stars of Bear City. Well, T. Sean Shannon, who's best known, if he's known at all, he's known for Bear City, the running sketch gag on SNL. Well, he wrote and directed this movie called Harold, which is about a prematurely balding teenager, and it's a coming-of-age comedy about a prematurely balding teenager, which started as a film bit on SNL right around the same time he was doing Bear City. The movie stars Spencer Breslin as the lead, and it's got Cuba Gooding Jr., Ali Sheedy plays his mother. It's got Colin Quinn, Chris Parnell, Rachel Dratch is in it, Dave Attell, Fred Willard, again, is also in it. It's a very weird, fucking strange movie. And T. Sean Shannon, who wrote a lot of sketches, best known for Bear City, wrote this movie. But I did not include Harold, because maybe 6 people know it exists, and I'm one of the few people who have seen it, and it's just too obscure and too weird. So in this list of 11 movies, feature films inspired by SNL sketches, I did not include Mr. Saturday Night, Bob Roberts, Office Space, a Mighty Wind, or Harold. But here we go from number 11 up, so I'm counting from worst to best. And there are a lot of worst on this list. So starting at number 11, the worst movie ever based on an SNL character / sketch, without question, is It's Pat. Julius Sweeney's androgynous character, and the whole bit was, you didn't know, I'm Pat. That whole thing where you don't know if Pat is a man or a woman. I thought the sketch was funny. I laughed at it. I thought Julius Sweeney's character was really weird, and I thought very, very funny. And I always thought it worked, no matter who the guest host was, no matter who the host was. They always brought out Pat and you always tried to guess who it was, and then they of course had to make a movie out of it, and it's horrible. And the whole the reveal of what sex Pat is ridiculous and weird and sketchy. It is an abomination. It's one of the worst movies ever made. There's not one single laugh in it. And here's a little fun fact for you. Motherfucking Quentin Tarantino ghost wrote that movie. Yes, the wonderful Quentin Tarantino, who's won all the Oscars and everybody loves him and he's such a brilliant writer, blah, blah, blah. Well, he was dating Julia Sweeney at the time, and he fucking ghost wrote It's Pat. So the next time he runs around talking about how much of a great writer he is, say, hey, dude, I loved It's Pat. Could you sign this for me? Ghost written by Quentin Tarantino, one of the worst movies ever made. It's Pat. Number 11 on the best list of Saturday Night Live movies. Number 10 is Blues Brothers 2000. One of the most unnecessary sequels of all time. Nobody wanted it. John Belushi was dead for many, many years when Dan Aykroyd, in all of his incredibly stupid wisdom, decided that he was going to make another movie. So who replaces who replaces John Belushi? Well, thankfully it wasn't Jim Belushi who has replaced John Belushi in the continuing stage saga that Dan Aykroyd just will not stop doing. But no, they replace him with John Goodman and a cute kid. There is not one there is a laugh in this movie involving shaving cream wrapped around Dan Aykroyd's head. There's a scene where he's running around, he's got his hat on, and his head is covered in shaving cream, and he's supposed to be rabid, and he's running around a restaurant. I laughed at that. It's the only thing I laughed at. It is the longest 2 hours and 10 minutes you will ever sit through, except for the music performances. Now, this is essentially, because Dan Aykroyd's a dickhead. Let me just say that right now. Fuck Dan Aykroyd, except for Saturday Night Live. His work on Saturday Night Live is amazing. It's stellar. It's groundbreaking. He is responsible for some of the best sketches, some of the best writing, some of the best characters in the history of SNL. One of the best cast members ever on SNL. Take him out of SNL, and for the most part, he fucking sucks. His movies suck. The stuff that he's done in movies has not been very memorable. Dan Aykroyd, outside of SNL, can fucking save it. He can save it. There are a few things here and there that I like that he did here and there, but for the most part, Dan Aykroyd is a piece of shit outside of SNL. And the fact that he continues this Blues Brothers thing just to sell his vodka and just to sell tickets to House of Blues, that's the only reason he continues to do any of this shit. He's a fucking grumpy, old, unfunny fucking bastard. And fuck Blues Brothers 2000. It's a terrible movie, except for the music at the end. Like the last 25 minutes, half hour, is just a filmed concert that he did at House of Blues. Like, he owns House of Blues. He got a bunch of incredible musicians and singers and songwriters, amazing talent, filmed a concert, and the last half hour of the movie is basically a great House of Blues concert with incredible artists. So that last half hour is amazing. Everything leading up to it, all the comedy, the story, the characters, everything. Absolute garbage. Blues Brothers 2000, number 10. Number 9, moving up on shit getting better. Wayne's World 2. I don't like Wayne's World. I never did. Fuck Mike Myers. He's a joke-stealing son of a bitch who is, a ton of the stuff that he's became successful for doing, he ripped off from other funnier, smarter people. He is a joke thief, minimally talented, who goes back on his bag of tricks. How many times is he going to do a Scottish accent? How many times is he going to do a British accent? He's got a very small bag of tricks that he goes back to all the time. If you go back and watch that period of time when he was on SNL, it's not very good. He's not very good on it. A lot of his shit is forced and not funny and cheap. And again, stolen from other funnier, more brilliant people. And I can't go into an entire, if I gave you examples of all the shit that Mike Myers stole from other, better, funnier people, this video would be 10 hours long. He is a goddamn thief who's not very funny. And the Wayne's World movies, I don't like them. I never liked the sketches very much. Sometimes the sketches were okay. I thought the sketch that they did the weekend the Gulf War started in 1991 was very funny and very timely. And every once in a while, the sketch itself, for about 3 minutes on an episode of Saturday Night Live, had some laughs. Not a big Dana Carvey fan either, so those two guys. But the sketch itself, every once in a while, Wayne's World as a sketch was funny. Wayne's World as a movie, both of them, fuck them. especially the second one. I didn't like the first one very much. I didn't think the first one was very funny. A couple of laughs here and there. Second one is unwatchable. Anybody who tries to defend, and I know a lot of people love Wayne's World, and that's good. That's good. Have your little fun. That's cool. But people who love the first Wayne's World, I can understand that, and I can understand people defending the first Wayne's World. There is no defense for Wayne's World 2. None. None at all. Even people who love the first Wayne's World know that the second Wayne's World is a piece of shit. So number 9 on the list of shit as we move up to good is Wayne's World 2. Number 8 is The Ladies' Man. There are moments in this movie that are funny. Tim Meadows, I think, is one of the heroes of SNL, one of the most underrated and underappreciated, solid cast members of all time. The guy was on the show for many years. Kenan Thompson broke the record that Tim Meadows had. No, I'm sorry. Daryl Hammond broke it. Then Kenan Thompson broke that record. Kenan Thompson, the longest cast member of tenure on SNL. But Tim Meadows was a guy that you could always count on. He was funny in everything. He's funny in everything he does. And The Ladies' Man is a very, very funny sketch. And that's another one of these movies, or another one of these examples where 3 minutes on a show every couple of weeks or once a month is funny. 90 minutes of that, not funny. And that's the case here. The sketches, the Ladies' Man sketches, are among the funniest in SNL history because they last 4 to 5 minutes. Trying to make a movie out of it, and that's kind of a problem with all of these movies. Like, a lot of these characters and a lot of these sketches are funny for 4 minutes on one show, but to stretch it out to 2 hours is sometimes impossible, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. And this is one of those cases. There are funny moments in it. There are great people in it. Reginald Hudlin directed it, who's a terrific director. And it does have moments. It's not horrible. It's not as bad as the other ones below it. But it's not good. And it's not good. It's a waste of Tim Meadows' talent. So The Ladies' Man comes in at number 9. Number 7 is Coneheads. Another example of why Dan Aykroyd is a sack of crap. A terrible movie. Has a few laughs here and there, and it's only because of the supporting cast. And this movie is loaded with cast members and ex-cast members of SNL. Chris Farley has a wonderful sort of supporting role in this. Michelle Burke, who plays the Lorraine Newman daughter role in this, is quite wonderful in it. And that was at the time when, whatever happened to Michelle Burke? Because she was so fucking good for a short period of time. She's in Dazed, Confused. She's so good in that. And she's the best part of Conehead. She's the best part of the movie. Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd come back and play Beldar, and it gets really completely ridiculous. And it's loaded down with all that stupid shit that Dan Aykroyd likes to load down in his movies. All technical mumbo-jumbo shit. Where he likes to get into the sci-fi stuff. He loaded down the Ghostbusters movies with that shit, too. It is Dan Aykroyd at his worst in terms of writing, and his performance is terrible in it. And again, Coneheads was great. Great. One of the greatest sketches and greatest characters in the history of SNL. As a movie, it was terrible. Way too late. Way too late. The movie came out in 1993. He left SNL in 1979. So, yeah, why don't you wait a little longer? Why don't you do another Blues Brothers movie? Wait a little longer for something to be completely, inconsequential. So yeah, Coneheads comes in at number 7. Number 6, as we move up, is Wayne's World. I don't like it. Sorry. People love it. I don't like it. I've already said what I needed to say about Wayne's World in Wayne's World 2. It is better than Wayne's World 2, but that's like saying having your pinky chopped off is better than having your middle finger chopped off. They both suck, but this one sucks less. So Wayne's World, number 6. Number 5 on the list is A Night at the Roxbury. Now we're getting into the territory where the movies start to get better. Night at the Roxbury is a funny movie. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Everybody hates it, blah, blah, blah. And at least in an attempt, and it doesn't work entirely at all. Again, this is a sketch that works for 3 to 4 minutes. And these guys don't even talk. In the sketches, they barely talk. And how are they going to make a movie, And I remember going in to see it thinking, oh, man, they're not going to be... Because the Night at the Roxbury guys kill me. Chris Kattan, Will Ferrell, those two characters destroy me. Every single appearance that they had on SNL was funny. Some of them were genius. The one with Jim Carrey goes without saying. One of the funniest sketches ever. And I love Chris Kattan, one of my favorite cast members ever. Will Ferrell goes without saying what a legend he is. Turned out to be in movies as well. And I love the characters. And I remember going, oh, God, they're not going to be able to stretch this into 90 minutes. And for the most part, they do. It falls in, but for the final third, not that great, and it goes on too long. First hour of the movie, surprisingly great. with great supporting performances. And they actually do a decent job explaining who these guys are and actually fleshing out a 3-minute sketch to 90 minutes. They do a pretty good job giving the background to these brothers and their story and providing a background. And it falls apart towards the end and it gets repetitive. It's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but there are a lot of laughs in it. Dan Hedaya is fucking hilarious in it. Richard Grieco makes a cameo in it. Chaz Palminteri is a riot in it. And Molly Shannon. Oh, Molly Shannon, my favorite female cast member in the history of SNL. One of the greatest cast members in Saturday Night Live history. One of my favorite actresses who has gone on to do great shit in television, in movies, is great as a dramatic actress and as a comedic actress. I love Molly Shannon so much. Also a great writer. Her memoir, Hello Molly, which came out this year, is fantastic. I love Molly Shannon, and she's hilarious in Night at the Roxbury and really sexy. Like, really, really sexy. Like, Molly Shannon, sexy in Night at the Roxbury. Night at the Roxbury for a solid hour, lots of laughs, very funny, and they do a really good job of stretching it out. Falls apart in the last half hour and becomes repetitive. Not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but a solid effort to stretch out a 3-minute sketch to 90 minutes. And Chris Kattan, Will Ferrell, hilarious, and those characters are great. So Night at the Roxbury is number 5. Number 4 on the list of best SNL movies is Superstar, which is Molly Shannon's Mary Catherine Gallagher, one of the greatest characters in the history of SNL. One of my favorite three-dimensional, beautifully written and designed characters of all time. Molly Shannon plays Mary Catherine Gallagher, and they stretch out her story. And her backstory is interesting and fun, and it fits in with how she came up with the character in real life, how she wrote it, who it's inspired by. And it's also consistent with what they set up in those 3 to 4 minute sketches that she did. Every single Mary Catherine Gallagher sketch, Superstar sketch that they did on SNL, gold. Every one of them funny. Gwyneth Paltrow one, probably the funniest one when Gwyneth Paltrow hosted. They do a great job with it. Will Ferrell is hilarious in it. Tom Green, no goatee, a young Tom Green is in this movie. Great supporting performances, a lot of big laughs. It gets really ridiculous. Again, like Night at the Roxbury, it goes on too long. Like it's directed by Bruce McCullough from Kids in the Hall. He directs it. There's a lot of very funny stuff in it. The character is lovely and you care about her. The musical numbers are great. I love Molly Shannon. I happen to have a bias here. So I think Superstar is funny. I watch it every time it comes on cable. I can see it does stretch out. It's only 80 minutes, but the last 20, again, it runs out of steam in the last 20. But as far as like stretching and developing a character based on a 3-minute sketch on SNL, they did the best they could with it, and it works out pretty well. It's very funny, and Molly Shannon is a goddamn gift from God. So that's number 4. Number 3 on the best of list is The Blues Brothers, a movie that I've had a lot of problems with. I've seen it a million times. I can't deny that it's a classic. As a Chicagoan, I can't deny the impact that it has on this city and how much people love this movie and love the city because of it. I don't think it's very funny. I think it's a one-joke movie. There are a few laughs here and there. I think John Candy has some moments in it. There are a couple of laughs here and there. But for the most part, people who have fucking loved this movie, I don't quite understand it. When it came out in the summer of 1980, I was too busy going back to see Caddyshack and Used Cars. I was going to see, the really funny movies that came out in the summer of 1980. So I didn't, Blues Brothers did not hit me, but the music, the bringing in James Brown and Aretha Franklin and John Lee Hooker and Ray Charles, and all of these great, Cab Calloway, bringing in all these great African-American artists who at that time, when the movie was shot in late 1979, nobody was listening to those acts. And I thought it was very cool. One of the cooler things that Dan Aykroyd has done, Dan Aykroyd and John Landis wrote it, by bringing those people back and shining a spotlight on these incredibly important, influential African-American artists that were getting no love at that time. The best part of the Blues Brothers is the fact that those artists, those musical artists, were shown to a younger generation, and as a result, became popular again. And that's the best part of the Blues Brothers. I do not love the Blues Brothers, but I can't deny it's a classic, and there are things in it that have gone down in history as classic. So that's number 3. Number 2, the second best SNL movie of all time is MacGruber, and this is a genuinely great movie. MacGruber is a great movie. MacGruber is the first. There are only 2 great movies on this list. The other ones are good to bad to shitty, spotty at best. MacGruber is the first one on this list. Number 2 is the first one that is a genuinely great movie. That is actually a really good movie. MacGruber, of course, Will Forte's ridiculous takeoff on MacGyver. And these were like 2-minute sketches. Every one of them ended with him blowing up and dying. And the supporting cast in this movie, Val Kilmer as Van Kunt, is unbelievable. Ryan Philippe, and of course, Jesus Christ, I'm blanking on Bridesmaids. Why am I blanking on Kristen Wiig? How the fuck am I blanking on Kristen Wiig's name? Kristen Wiig is great in it. MacGruber's hilarious. I remember seeing it in the theater at a sneak preview the night before it opened, and I was the only one in the theater laughing. Nobody else was laughing. I think MacGruber is hilarious. Now people started to catch on. People are starting to catch on. I thought the Peacock series from earlier this year was brilliant. I thought every episode was great. I love MacGruber. I loved it in the 2-minute ridiculous exploding blackouts that they did. Every time. I didn't know how they were going to make it into a movie, and they did. They turned it into the most ridiculous thing you could possibly imagine. One of the Lonely Island guys directed it. It was written by John Solomon and created by the great Will Forte, who is one of my favorite cast members in the history of SNL, one of the weirdest cast members in the history of SNL, and has gone down in history as, I think, is the guy who has gotten the weirdest shit ever on SNL. And actually, the first episode of That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years is dedicated entirely to the potato chip sketch that John Solomon and Will Forte wrote. That's maybe my favorite sketch in the history of SNL, yeah. And so the very first episode on January 11th, when it drops at radiomisfits.com of my podcast, is going to be entirely dedicated to the potato chip sketch that Will Forte wrote. I love Will Forte. I love everything he does. He's a fucking nut job. He's nuts. He's crazy. Last man on earth. Everything he's ever done, the brothers Solomon with him and Will Arnett, brilliant. I love him. I love MacGruber. It's a great movie. It's hilarious. And so MacGruber is number 2. Number 1, a legitimately great film, directed by Harold Ramis, the best SNL sketch/character inspired movie of all time, without question, is Stuart Saves His Family. Stuart Saves His Family is a fucking great movie. A movie that had no business being as good as it is. I expected the worst. This, of course, is based on the sketch that Al Franken created about a self-help guru on TV named Stuart Smalley, who has the self-help show where he talks into the mirror. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. People remember that running sketch that they've done. Everybody remembers the one Michael Jordan was on, legendary, where Michael Jordan breaks as he's looking into the mirror. And Stuart Smalley is this character, very affected and very weird. And I remember hearing that they were going to make a movie out of it, and I'm like, no way. No way can they take this character with the ridiculous voice and lisp and the mannerisms and the ridiculous costumes. There is no way that they could make a 90-minute movie and make this character watchable for that long. No fucking way. Well, leave it to Al Franken, and mostly leave it to Harold Ramis to make a movie that is brilliant. It is a movie about addiction. It is a movie about alcoholism. It is a movie about being a helper to those people. It's a film that is based on Al Franken's real life. Al Franken comes from a family of addicts and alcoholics, and it's based on his life. The father character, played by Harris Yulin, the brother, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, all of the other characters, the characters that he knows, the people that he works with, his family, the whole family thing, the dynamic is based on his life dealing with addiction and alcoholism in his life. This original screenplay, the original idea for this was turned into When a Man Loves a Woman, which was the Andy Garcia, Meg Ryan drama about alcoholism. That was written by Al Franken, because Al Franken, in his life, has dealt with addiction and alcoholism as part of his family. And it's deeply rooted into him as a human being, his dealings with addiction and alcoholism. And that's what Stuart Saves His Family is all about. And they make the character lovable. They make the character realistic. That stupid voice and the hair, somehow it works. They made him three-dimensional. He's more than just a one-dimensional catchphrase spouting character. He's a three-dimensional real character, and you care about his family. You care about what he goes through. It's about overcoming addiction. It's about dealing with with the problems in your family that come from alcoholism. It's a beautiful movie. It's also very funny. There are a lot of big laughs in it, and it goes way beyond some stupid catchphrase 4-minute SNL sketch and is a real film, beautifully directed by Harold Ramis, bringing a humanist quality to it that you would never expect, and a humanist three-dimensional quality that exists in none of the other 10 movies on this list. None of them. None of the movies even come close. This is a real film, a really beautiful three-dimensional movie, and I love Stuart Saves His Family. Criminally underrated, bombed at the box office. Critics didn't like it very much. I think people were confused. I don't know what they expected based upon, looking at these sketches on SNL. What did people expect? I don't know. It certainly wasn't what I expected. And I remember running up to Harold Ramis, who I saw at a screening of the first Harry Potter movie, and I walked up to him, and I had met him one time before. He didn't remember. I went up to him, and I shook his hand, and I said, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for Stuart Saves His Family. I didn't say Ghostbusters, you know what I mean? I didn't say Groundhog Day. I could have said like 27 other movies. I could have actually, well, no, I couldn't have because it was before Ice Harvest. I couldn't have said Ice Harvest. But I did say Stuart Saves His Family, and he looked at me like, wow, oh, thank you. Because he never hears that. When Harold Ramis was alive, nobody ran up to him and didn't mention Ghostbusters, and the first thing they mentioned was Stuart Saves His Family. That's how fucking weird I am. And that's how weird my podcast is going to be and how thorough it's going to be. I know way too much about SNL. Way too much, and I'm going to share it all with you. Great guests, great topics, all SNL related. That show hasn't been funny in years. January 11th, radiomisfits.com. I'm your host. It's all SNL once a week, and it's going to be great. So here it is, the rundown of the 11 SNL sketch/character-inspired movies. Here they are, from first to last. Number 1, Stuart Saves His Family. Number 2, MacGruber. Number 3, The Blues Brothers. Number 4, Superstar. Number 5, A Night at the Roxbury. Number 6, Wayne's World. Number 7, Coneheads. Number 8, The Ladies' Man. Number 9, Wayne's World 2. Number 10, Blues Brothers 2000. And number 11, It's Pat, It's an Abomination. So there you go. Leave your comments here. Check me out on Patreon. Give a little dough there. And make sure you check out my podcast. And what do you think about these SNL movies? Let me know.